Welcome to our today's discussion at the UNESCO City of Design Conference. We will be talking about sustainable cities today, and with the topic of sustainability, the carbon dioxide output is very strongly related, especially when we are talking about traffic, despite when you are using the bicycle.
Graz was one of the first Central European cities that established a bicycle road net.
We have in Graz a long tradition of smart and sustainable mobility, and therefore in the last years all over the city spread more and more bike workshops and reuse cafes. And this will be one of the main topics, I think, in today's discussion.
The challenges we are facing when we are talking about sustainable cities are multiple. They extend from energy consumption to waste management, from urban development to traffic concepts. These are some of the topics we would like to discuss today. And to enter into this discussion, we have prepared a short film.
Could future cities perform like a forest? The Austrian architect and designer cooperative, Breath Earth Collective, thought, why not? And started a piece of experimental research on this question.
We found out that the most important food is air. We tried to find solutions where you can build such microclimate oases in the city.
At the Skulpturenpark Graz, Breath Earth Collective started a pilot project.
The idea of Evapotri in Skulpturenpark was that you have a very powerful, very small element that can be everywhere, also somewhere in the city, that can produce good and clean air with a high amount of oxygen. We don't need electric power, only a little bit to bring the humidity in the air by these fog nozzles. Then everything else is working with the plants, what they're doing all the day, everywhere on the whole planet.
In the meantime, Breath Earth Collective have begun to disseminate their Evapotri concept to cities like Vienna and others.
What we really want to bring in the world is that these solutions for climate change or even little oases can really have a beauty, and you can love them, you can really enjoy them.
Sustainable techniques are quite developed. We already have the technical methods. What we have to do is to make it real. It's not just that we are making cities bigger and bigger and consuming more territory, but we have to rethink how the city works with the territory.
In order to raise awareness for the relationships between cities and their surroundings, the Spanish architects collective, PES Estudio, started the Agroplaza project, which involves people in an experimental dialogue about the sustainability of cities. Other communication projects, such as the Klima Champs app from Graz, which is intended to motivate people to live sustainably in the region, have similar goals. In most cities today, a sustainable lifestyle is impossible. The uncontrolled growth on the outskirts of the cities has made people dependent on cars. In Graz, new district projects like the Reininghaus Quarter are currently being developed to counteract this.
Two important things: mixed use and density. In fact, if you decide to live in Reininghaus, there are not so many reasons why you have to leave Reininghaus. There is excellent bicycle infrastructure, then there is very attractive public transport, and there are many restrictions concerning car traffic. This begins in your own building. If you own a flat in Reininghaus, it's not possible to come to your car without leaving the house. You cannot just enter a lift and go downstairs and there is a car. You have to go out of the door just the same way like you have when you go to the public transport. So we wanted to make it a fair competition between the car and other means of transport.
But it is another factor that has the greatest influence on the resource consumption of cities: the economic conditions under which products are manufactured and profits are made with them.
We have to switch from the linear system to the circular system, which means that we can use, reuse, repair and also recycle materials, buildings again and again. There are so many products, so many resources in our cities. In the beginning of the design process or in the beginning of producing a product, we should think about, do we really need it? Should we actually produce something, or maybe should we make a service out of it? That we don't have to buy a car, we just lend a car. And this we could do with a lot of other products. The designer has to think about what is with the product if we don't use it anymore. And steps before recycling it should be reusing it, reselling it, repairing it, upcycling it, and then one of the last steps is recycling it. Because recycling a material or a product demands a lot of energy.
Sustainability includes 3 pillars. First, to take care about the environment. The second is it's really important to think in economic categories, and not to forget, very important, the social issues.
Reusing actually demands a lot of engagement, because reusing, it could mean that you change products on a swapping party, or you bring it to a second-hand shop, you borrow it to your neighbors. So it's more a social engagement actually.
Sustainability as a question of social engagement. This is one of the topics we would like to discuss today. And to enter into our discussion, we now may welcome Aglaée Degros for her keynote speech. Thank you for being with us today, Aglaée. Aglaée is professor at the Technical University in Graz and head of the Department or Institute of Urbanism, and you are strongly focusing in your work on questions of urban development with a focus on the interfaces between planning, landscape, mobility, and so on. We are very curious about your talk. You will be talking about the sustainable city, fragile city.
Thank you, Hans-Jürgen. And it makes me all the more pleased to be here today, because in 2007 I was invited at the Biennale in Saint-Étienne, and it was for me my first international keynote speech, and it allowed me in a way to be here today in Graz. Yes, the keynote is called The Sustainable City, the Fragile City, and it relates to the crisis, the pandemic crisis we are experiencing and going through. I think this crisis makes us discover that the city is maybe a bit more fragile than what we thought. We have empty shops in the city center. We have flats that are a bit too cramped. We have a public space a bit too tight also. And we see in some cities in Europe already a kind of real estate movement through the suburbanity. 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Standard with the title, "The New Luxury is the Space." And it's not a new discussion. Already in the 19th century, the high density in the industrial cities, they were argued to be one of the major causes of fire, social disorder, disease also. But And as a result, we have a control of the planning, and we develop instruments to I will say, regulate the density. But we discover in the 60s that regulating this density and those regulation, they were a strong effect on the liveliness of our city, on the transportation system, and also on the environment. We know already from a while, since Jean Jacobs, that if we want to achieve a city, as Bernhard Inninger described it, a city of 15 minutes, that means that we can have our amenities, our green space, in a short walking distance or cycling distance, we need a certain density. The density allows us a mutualization of our resource and our spatial resource. It means that, I think, if we really don't want to go back a century, I think we have, and we want to fight against the climate change, and we don't have that much time to tackle this problem. I think we shouldn't question the quantity of space, but we should question the quality of space. And that's very important, this shift in the discussion. Then I will rephrase maybe the article, the title of the standard is said the new luxury is a good space, I think. And I would like to refer to an example from Vienna. It's the Nordbahnhof. It's a project done by the office, the studio Valle and Sterevich. The competition was about a huge plot of land, and the description of the density was 2.5. And the model used for the competition was just to fulfill the site with building and street and small gardens. And the proposal of the Studio Valle was very interesting because it put the building around the site, and in the middle, center of the composition was an ecological green space. And of course, it reduced the amount of asphalt and street in this proposal from 85%, and it is a very different biotope. But within the same frame, from the density is exactly the same that what was proposed. There is a very beautiful publication about this project. It's this in the book Critical Care, Architecture and Urbanism for a Broken Planet. I really recommend you to have a look, because it's a compilation of a project that goes in this direction, that places the sustainability in the center of the project. You know, if I take some basic from the city, like the public space, the street, or the housing, you will see that the quality of the space, well, it can be quite easily improved. It's more a question of priority. And we could take the street, a random street in Graz or in Brussels, where I come from, as 8-10 meters, but we walk on 80 centimeters. The sidewalk is 80 centimeters, and we have now this recommended distance of 1.50 meters. It's even not what we have as space on the sidewalk. What we recall in our book with my partner Stefan Bendix, the book is called Traffic Space is Public Space, is that we have public space in the city, but it is really much dominated by the car, by the traffic, by the parking of car. And maybe it requires a more fairly share of the space for active mobility, for the passive mobility still, it's needed, and the ecology. Again, I will refer to a project. It's in Sint-Niklaas in Belgium. It's the central square of this municipality. It's the biggest square of Belgium. It's a 4-hectare square. It's a lot of space. There is space enough there. And there was a competition that my office, engineering, we won this summer. And simply, we exclude the car traffic. We prioritize the pedestrian and bicycle traffic. we made a big lawn with trees around and with some water features that serve as storage, cooling and water filtering. And that means that basically this big square from 4 hectares is in the new design a kind of climate regulator of the whole inner city. I think I like here to quote, and we were inspired for this project by a quote from Mohsen Mostafavi. I recommend also a lot his book, which is called Ecological Urbanism. He compares the city with an SUV, and he says, of course, we can make an SUV hybrid, but we can also reconsider the fact that it is an SUV. And I think it's in this way that we should think at city a bit maybe more radical and sometimes reconsider some behavior we inherited from the 50s. Yes, in that's the example for the public space, for the street, but of course also in the housing we have the same discussion. I think there are not that much city that have a very good survey from what is empty and what is occupied, and I think that's really important. If we want to not produce more and more dwellings, we should know at least what we use. And often, and I had those discussions as well in Austria and in Belgium, we follow the market, and at the moment the market say we need some small dwellings, but I wonder if we really need small dwellings or if we can invest a small capital, and that means that it's a bit different what we need, because we know we are cramped in our dwellings, and what the market say that we should produce, yes? And I think we should challenge that, and there are new forms of dwellings that are really interesting, that for instance like co-housing, this pooling of resource, this pooling of space with more qualitative common space, yeah? And I had a discussion recently with the architect from Switzerland and who also work in France, Philippe Ram, and he explained me a very interesting idea, that he thinks that we should not anymore plan and have a fridge in our own apartment, but that we should share in our dwellings. We should share in the building a cool cellar where we can store our food, and that is much more easy to organize with the delivery of food. And I think it's interesting because at the same time he related, I think, the ecological point, the ecological problematic of replacing something that is consuming a lot of energy with simply a space which is cool. He related with the fact that it's more affordable, then it means that he related with social inequalities, and he related with this pooling of resource, that we also create a space where people, they can share things, a common space. Of course, he refers a lot, and is somebody that refers a lot to Bruno Latour, and this relation between social inequalities and climate change. And he, with his proposal, tried to tackle both of them. Okay, now that's if we look at this situation of cramped situation we have in the city, and we witness this this flow of people to the suburb. But I think, of course, if we go back in time, it will be really pity. It will be very, very pity. But if we take that as a chance to also a bit reconsider our mantra that we had the last decade about the all-powerful city, I think then it's maybe a crisis that could be very interesting, because we see that the city, it was so much promoted as the sustainable model of urbanism, the sustainable model, and maybe we see that it get at this point that the city did feel autonomous from the territory. We see that, for instance, 40 mayors of city, they create a network and they exchange best practice, which I think is great, but I think it distance them from the regional and national body. And that is pity, because it disconnects in a way the city from the territory. An example is a study published in the Graz Architecture magazine number 16. It's an example from Hans Orting about Singapore. It says, okay, Singapore is promoted as the sustainable city, but it excludes from the sustainable policy, for instance, the extraction of sand that is needed to build the city. That means that, yes, the city is sustainable, but the surrounding is pretty much destroyed by the extraction of sand. And I think strongly that for me the next project will not be a projet urbain, an urban project, but it will be a territorial project. That we see that in Graz, we can experience that, I think, in two very new projects. In our garden park, we had there a very beautiful park, which had abrupt bank with the river Moor. And recently, the municipality transformed those banks and made a beach, and that's fantastic, I think, because there the city meet an element from the territory, the moor, the water. But we see that the water is not that clean that we can swim in it. And I think for me, that's what I mean by the next project will be territorial. It means that I think the next challenge is make this water swimmable. We have that with the bicycle also. I'm really pleased when I see our mayor opening this event on his cargo bike. I think it's great what the city had started with this a bicycle master plan for the city. But the next challenge for me, and well, of course, there are already a lot of challenge to make a bicycle master plan, but the next challenge will be to make this connection with the surroundings, that those connection, those bike connection within the city, then can also reach the surroundings and, of course, improve the sustainable traffic coming from around the city. Well, I would like to conclude this keynote to see that I think the current crisis, it's a chance for us to link the spatial and the territorial justice to the ecology. It means to have a more fair share of the space. And therefore, we should, I think, avoid the pitfall of the discussion about the quantity of space, but we should really focus on the quality of the space. And I think when we do so, I think we have all in our hand to turn a fragile city into a city which is ecologically and humanly alive, a vivid city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aglaée. We will now open the discussion, and I would like to welcome our guests here in the studio. I would like to welcome Sigrid Bürstmayr. Sigrid is a designer and lecturer at the University of Applied Sciences in Graz and has a strong focus on product design, but with special perspectives on cycle economy, and we will have the opportunity to talk about that in the course of the discussion. And in Mexico, we should be linked with PAULINA Cornejo Moreno Valle. She is a professor for social innovation at the Centro de Diseño, Cine y Televisión in Mexico City, and engaged in research and projects that are dealing social approaches for sustainable strategies for cities. Paulina, do you hear us, and do we have you in the line? Hello, Paulina.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, hello, Paulina. A warm welcome from Graz. And from Dundee in Scotland, we welcome Husam Waer. He is a professor of sustainable urban design at the Dundee University in Scotland. And in his research, among many other topics he is interested in, he focuses on questions of how master planning and design practices can contribute to promote sustainable city developments. You are also focusing, as far as I know, on strategies for co-creation and co-design, which to some extent, of course, is linked to the topic before. A warm welcome to you, Husam.
Hi everyone. Hi, thanks for the invite.
Before we start the panel discussion, I would also invite you to participate in this discussion as well in the YouTube stream and in the Zoom stream. You can post questions. We will pick up some of these questions and bring it into this discussion. I see we already have the first one. We will focus on that a little later. But now I would like to open the discussion with you, Husam. There is a lot of professional expertise in terms of urban development planning, urban development strategies. We are having experts here in the studio and online as well. But the question is, what can be done that these strategies that are always linked to political decision making, what can be done that these strategies unfold a wider impact?
This is really interesting questions, and thanks for raising these important questions. The problem when it becomes to politicians, the way they act, political people, they always act, how can I say, for what I call it short-termism, which is what I call it the short political cycle. Normally, this political cycle expand up to 5 years. This is really very common in Europe and in others. So they look at it for the political cycle. They don't look at it for the next 15 or 20 years. And this is the problem we face in some European cities. That's people only think for short term, which is most of the time about ticking box exercise or thinking about quantity over quality, as as my colleague or the speakers mentioned earlier, without putting the place in the long term. The danger with that, so that's one thing, short term versus long term. The second point, if you allow me, when you have a new political cycle after 5 years, they don't buy into the previous vision from the previous political cycle. And most of the time they may start with different agenda or new agenda. And if that's happened, you will see that the place has not progressed. However, having said that, there are some really good examples where, and allow me to give you an example, city like Freiburg in Germany. They start their vision in about 1985. Despite the change in the political cycle, they still buy into, how can I say, the previous vision, which started in 1985. No problem with evolving the vision. So for example, say the first 5 years, for whatever reason, you concentrated on green energy or green infrastructure or ecology. And the next 5 years or 10 years, you start investing in something else. Nothing wrong with evolving the vision. Actually, I am very much against fixing a master plan. You can't fix a place. Place all the time evolve. But you have to build that into your master plan. So time and how it evolves is key in this case. And I think our politicians need to be aware of it. And they must buy into the vision which start earlier. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Husam, and I think that fits very well to example, Paulina, we have been talking about in the discussion we had before our discussion today. You gave us an example of a project in Mexico City that has been developed for over 10 years, as far as I understood it, and then it immediately stopped. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, I completely agree with what Husam was mentioning about short-term and long-term agendas, because I think in Latin America and in Mexico, this has been a constant problem. And every time we have a change in government, we face a lot of we have a lot of struggle to continue what we have been doing, especially as activists or in academia or social society. And yeah, we've been talking about a project that is called the Ecoducto. So this is a river that is now part of a highway, so it goes below. And this was part of an infrastructure project that was developed in the 20th century, a big infrastructure project. So the river now goes, it's tubed. So for almost a decade, this group of activists and architects and academia players, they gathered together around this river, which you couldn't even see, it was just like a part of a highway. And they had picnics in the river, and they had conversations, and they were inviting people from the city to talk about water and to talk about culture and to talk about activism and how to recover part of this river. And after about 10 years, they were able to convince the government, the local government, to be part of it. So they managed to do an open call for architects and urban planners and activists, and a lot of people joined this project, and they collaborated and participated in designing how this would be. So it's a linear park now. They recover 1.6 kilometers of it. So they managed to take out this part of the river, and it's a bioremediation system, recover the wastewater from the cover river, and then they have also some plants, and they recover part of the traditional chinampa system from Mexico. So it's also a bioremediation system with plants that has impact in climate and in water culture in the city. So this was very important. But the thing is that in 2018, we had a change also in local government. And this had also an impact in the project because it was opened in 2017. And it now is struggling for its visibility, for the security. People in the surroundings are also reclaiming security, maintenance. So this is always happening, you know, like the agency that was collaborating for the recovery disappeared with the new government. So this is a constant struggle.
This is a perfect example where one of the main challenges for urban development and sustainable urban development are. But let's not only focus on open political questions, because we have experts here who at least can develop strategies and proposals what can be done. And I would like to talk to you, Sigrid. We have so many resources within our cities, and we have not developed so far the structures for mining these resources. Could you give us some examples where that already has worked?
So you're completely right. Resources are getting less and less, so we have a lack of resources already. So why not using the materials you have in the cities? And for example, there is a study about Vienna which says, I wrote down the numbers, which says there are more than 4,000 kilogram iron, 300 kilograms aluminium, 200 kilograms copper, and 40 kilograms zinc and lead hidden under each inhabitant. So this is hidden in our streets, under our houses. And of course, taking these materials would be much more cheaper than getting them from mines from somewhere far away. It's a big effort for energy, for time, and of course for transportation. And nowadays there are already some companies which offering reuse-oriented deconstruction as a service for the building owners. And there are also second-hand shops. So second-hand shops for windows, for bricks, and for used wood.
Could we focus a little more on the distinction between reuse and recycling, because this makes a big difference?
Yeah, I also grew up in a area where we learned about recycling and it's the best we can do, but actually it should be one of the last we are doing with our materials. First, we should start with the thing about do we really need it? So maybe we should refuse actually producing things. So it's about transforming a new system, a new way. Then we should, we could repair things, we can share it, we can resell it. And then one of the last steps is recycling, because recycling means a lot of energy consumption to make a new material, for example, melting glass, metal.
Reusing and upcycling, we already saw that in the film, also needs social structures, and that is linked also to the quality of space, because if we don't have the public space where people can gather to establish such networks, then we will not establish a society where these structures can develop. What can urban planners contribute to these questions? And I would like to focus it especially on topics that is related to housing development, because there can be done many things that are not at the first glance linked to sustainability, but when you take a little deeper look into it, they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think indeed we can first, much more design together, I think, that we did a lot the city alone as expert or as decider. And I think we can much more involve the inhabitants in the choice to make the city. And this, I think we have this now word of city makers, that those are those inhabitants that want to also participate to the construction and to thinking about those city, about those common space, what you call this place where this idea they can come together, I think. And that's very interesting. Well, we shouldn't forget that the city management and the expert, they have a place in this process, because we see also that sometime now making the city is just gather people and there comes some idea in all direction and well, let's do that. But I think that it should be combined, I think, with a strategy, and we see now many cities struggling to find this balance between this management of the city and the integration of this energy and those ideas from the inhabitants of the city.
It's a struggle between expertise on the one side and democratic structures on the other side. And Husam, I think this is a topic you are working on as well, because you are very strongly focused on questions of co-creation. What is your opinion on co-creation? Where are the limits on the one hand, and what can we do that we, at the other hand, support co-creation, because we need the knowledge from different sectors. How can you combine that in an effective way?
Now, I will agree with you. There will be no one-size-fit approach when it's come to co-creation, co-decisions. For another reason, if I may tell you my experience, even democracy, because when you talk about participatory places, participatory placemaking, you don't need kind of democratic constitutions for that. And interestingly, I found that subject really vary even between European countries, but even between the UK. What I am trying to say, community engagement when it's come to planning decision is really very vary between countries. So there will be no one-size-fit approach. But what is important, what I noticed, the top-down is important. The top-down approach is very crucial. Yes, we need people, we need politicians, we need people upstairs. Why? Because those people has got the resources, the money, and the power. And the power. But equally, we need the bottom-up. We need people to be involved, and especially because people has got the local knowledge and they are expert about their area, about their neighborhoods. So we need to find a way. Top down must meet the bottom up. top-down must meet the bottom-up. I am not sure about all the time some people trying to push the bottom-up. Yes, bottom-up is important, but it has to work with the top-down. Because I repeat myself, top-down has got the resources, the money, and the power. Plus, we as a professional, where we stand, I called ourselves, we are the middle in and the middle out. We, the professional, we are the mediator between the two. We are the facilitator. We have a very important role to play between the two. So that's in a way or another, just briefly, and I would love to hear the European experience about this subject itself. One more thing, what the pandemic showed, the importance of everything centralized, I noticed. We need to give more power. We need kind of decentralize the systems, and especially at neighborhood level. Especially at neighborhood level, giving the people more empowerment and power to run their neighborhood. Yes, we need them, but remember, without the top-down, I do question then the authenticity of any engagement without having this strong relationship between the two. Thank you.
The difference between the top-down and the bottom-up approach, here in Austria we have a very specific situation with the competencies of the federal government, the district government, and cities and even smaller villages. The federal government is only in charge of a general master planning for the space development as such, but the main decisions are with the mayors, not only of the cities but also of the surrounding smaller villages, and this has a strong impact on the Austrian space development. What are the main problems in this concern?
I think it's in terms of sustainable city, it's very important to have a good collaboration. It's exactly what I explained in my keynote, that the water doesn't stop at the geographic politic border of the city, it goes through the territory. Then we should have a good collaboration between more regional politics and a local politics, and often it is not clear. It is also, we keep that a bit unclear, because we can say, no, he said that or he said that, when we have, I will say, unwelcome decision to bring to the citizen. And I think the dialogue between those different territorium must be established. That's very, and sometimes also I think a supra-local must prime on a local, and that happens not that often. Yeah?
Not that often in many countries in Europe. In Austria especially, it's a bit different in Germany, because they have another share of competencies. There are more competencies on the regional level, and you can see it from Google Earth. The difference. Take a look at Bavaria, at villages and cities in Bavaria. They have a very focused urban development, and take a look at Upper Austria, Austria, what you can find there in the satellite pictures.
Yes, or I think in the Netherlands it's very interesting also, because there is this tradition to fight against the water. Then there is a kind of authorities, which is the Waterschap. It's a company that manages the whole system of water in the Netherlands, and that's supra-local and related to an element of the ecology, and that's very interesting.
Amanda from YouTube puts a very interesting question. She asks, do there exist strategies for implementing the UN Sustainable Development Goals in urban city plannings? Do you know any example where you can say, okay, this works well there?
Translated the SDG 11 in the city planning as that? No. But if you look at the different targets, of course they are integrated in many policies, like having accessible green space open to all. Well, this you can find back, yes, but literally I will say no at the moment. Yeah?
Husam, do you have some examples where one can see that they are really strongly, where cities are really strongly focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
I am well aware now. Let me tell you this, at governmental level, if I may say, Wales in the UK, Wales, over the last 2 years, they really have, how can I say, adopted the SDGs as part of their strategic planning. And interestingly, they are trying to push the health agenda. So that's, I found it interesting. And recently in the UK now, some local authority, they start now putting forward how they transfer the 17 SDGs goal into indicators which could be applied at city level and at neighborhood level.
We are not only facing the challenges of developing cities and urban and metropolitan areas, but even more of redeveloping them. We have seen it in the film. The outskirts of many cities around the world are devastated, more or less. What can be done that these structures that make the people dependent on in their daily life, what can be done that these structures can be rebuilt?
Yeah, I think it's nice because we work on a different scale, but it's exactly the same question at the beginning, is to ask you, do we need to build? No? And we see, I think Graz is a very good example, because we see the city growth, but if you look, 75% from the growth come from the surroundings, people moving from the rural to the city. And then we can ask us, yeah, do we need those buildings in Graz, or do we maybe need a new form of dwelling in those small villages? And I think that goes in the same direction. That's what you told about reusing those. And of course, after that, the construction is a very dirty business also. We still work with a very old-fashioned procedure, I think. And for instance, having good technical recommendation how to destroy and how to rebuild things is very rare. And it's also much more expensive at the moment. And that, I think, could change, yes, if we want to recycle then the material as you explained here. Yeah?
Reusing material, especially when we are talking about construction and buildings, costs more money at the moment than buying new material for building. What can be done that the level or the competition level between these two perspectives are competitive?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a lot of work to come there, that it's equal in quality and money-wise. But maybe let us make a step even more back. Maybe we should think about different materials. As you mentioned, the materials now or the buildings are not up to date. So actually, there are buildings or there are projects, for example, where buildings are built in the circular economy, which means everything can be reused and there is no waste.
Reusing buildings is also a challenge for architecture, because you can plan buildings from the very beginning that they are capable of housing different functions in the course of its existence. What are the aspects one has to focus on if you want to build a building for being open for many different purposes?
Yeah, it's. I will say the building should have a good special qualities. Then it will remain in the time. I think we have a very good building that we still use in the city because they have certain special qualities and also climatic qualities. I think it's very important. We forgot Philippe Ramy explained a lot the architecture with the climate. He said a cathedral was a place to meet in a climate that was cool in the summer. And it remained that. And I think that's very interesting, I think, to link the architecture and the climate qualities. And maybe for the future, as in the public space, I think we could also improve the climate. I think the architecture, I think, will deal more and more with this.
Architecture is in recent times focusing very strongly on new technologies as well, and you mentioned a good example with the cellar that one can use low-tech to be more sustainable in a city. Husam, when you are starting projects in co-creation and co-design, how strong is the focus on low-tech solutions for a sustainable project in your work? And do you have, for instance, some examples for that?
This is quite interesting. I have to admit, here in the UK, we start using a lot the technology as a way to get the community engaged when it comes to these design decisions, especially at local level. And there has been some really good, how can I say, is good case studies and good examples to get community on board when that to get engaged. The only things there that's as well come with its challenges in terms of some people may have no access to internet sometimes, they may have no access to mobile phone, or some people in rural area may have not access to a good speedy internet. So what I'm trying to say, someone may have to be careful on with whom we use technology when it's to come to engagement itself. It is still a good tool sometimes to get people on board, but I do question whether it is the only way to get all the community, regardless their age, on board. So we may have to be careful where and how we use the technology.
The fastest growing cities in the world are in Asia and in the developing countries of the South, as well in Central America. Paulina, the issue that has been mentioned, using high-tech or low-tech for city development, is of even greater importance when we are talking about cities with great social differences, with a great share of population living in poverty. Mexico City is one of the largest cities in the world, and people who have been there and who have seen the outskirts know which problems a city like this can have. When we are talking about developing sustainable projects, let's say in suburban regions, what approaches could one take for even start such a project?
Well, it's very complex what you're mentioning. Yeah, Mexico City has almost 9 million inhabitants, and only in the city. And then we have the metropolitan area, which is almost 13 more million. So we have a huge, it's called Zona Metropolitana del Valle de Mexico, so it's the whole zone. And we have really to deal with all kind of problems and all type of communities where a lot of people have access to technology and a lot of people are really disconnected. So this is very complex when talking about designing solutions that either come top down, bottom up, or that are trying to reach people through technology. So sometimes, I mean, you cannot only try to, it's not reliable only to do it that way. So when you try to develop these type of solutions, it's better like to go person to person, but this is also very complex because you have the problems of how to enter these neighborhoods or how to build trust and how to build community. So like, for example, social labs or the labs that are working sometimes with universities and cities and in Latin America, the difference between the labs that are working in Europe, like city labs, is that in Latin America, we are focusing on building trust. And this is important because people don't really trust the government. So the difference between trying to build these kind of solutions or agendas that maybe you can have an agenda that is more working on sustainability. For example, in Europe, is known that agendas are more focused on sustainability in PSI labs, for example, or health. But in Mexico or in Latin America, these type of agendas are more built on open government and building trust. And this is very interesting because first you have to reach the people, and then you have to try to work with them and collaborate with them and build this kind of trust that will help you build solutions and create a dialogue and a collaboration. And then you have the problem that we mentioned before, that is the lack of continuity of programs. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but what I'm trying to tell you is that it's very, very, very complex to do this when you don't have really the answers to trust, collaboration, technology, access to technology. And I think the best way to do it is through academia and through social organizations and NGOs that are there to stay and that can have more attachment to those agendas.
When we are talking about fast-growing cities, also with irregularly occupied areas on the outskirts of the cities, many of these areas are very often linked to the question that where these people live, these are zones at risk, be it for flooding, be it for landslides and things like that. There are many examples, and we should now have Daniela Tahira in the line. She is from Curitiba in Brazil, and she is architect at the Institutes for Research and Urban Planning in Curitiba. Hello, Daniela. Hi. Thank you for being with us. You are working at a project management of climate risk in Barrio Novo in Caximba. Could you tell us a little bit more about this project, because I think that fits to the question we had before.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the invitation for this group. So we are developing this area that's called, the project's called Bairro Novo do Caximba, Climate Risk Management Project. And it's about an area in Caximba neighborhood. It's located in the very southern part of Curitiba, where Barigui River ends at Iguaçu River. And Iguaçu River is the most important river in Paraná state, our state here in Brazil. And it's the birth of our so famous tourist attraction, the Iguaçu Falls. So in 2010, October 29th, it's almost its birthday already, an irregular occupation has started in this environmental protected area. So from 2010 and 2017, this irregular occupation has expanded and consolidated by illegal landfill of the former caves of sand extraction. And in December 2017, there were about 1,693 households in very precarious conditions. Aiming to mitigate the extreme conditions of social and environmental vulnerability, the municipality integrated sectoral government areas, the community, and the organized civil society, and we elaborated this project, Bairro Novo do Caximba. As I have very short time to explain the project, I can say that the project is divided into two main themes: micro-drainage and environmental recovery of this area. We make a system formed by the recovery of the ecological corridor of the river, basins for the river spreading, a productive park with sports and leisure facilities. And also we have in this project the urban infrastructure for this community. Social facilities and public facilities such as the sewage, water supply, electricity, transportation, housing, and we'll guarantee services, the education, health, and social assistance. I can say that it's a complete project by Renovo do Caximba, and it's been a laboratory for the integration of the climate change adaptation to urban planning. We had the chance to integrate governance, enable co-creation with the community, and an intersectoral team from the government.
As far as I understood it, you have been focusing on the development of basic infrastructure that was not there when this area was inhabited by the people. But how is that linked to sustainability? I didn't understand that.
Yeah, I don't know if you know that Curitiba is very famous for its urban planning based on the tripod of sustainability. We've since the 70s, we've already made our first master plan was in the 1945, and since the establishment of the Institute for Research and Urban Planning, as I work at, it's an organization that takes care of the master plan, and we've been developing the strategy based on sustainability of the transportation system, the road system, and land use integrated since that decade. And the same is happening since then, and we've been bringing this also to this particular neighborhood, integrating these three tripods, these three issues, to develop socially this community, environmentally, and but the main issue for the project is the drainage. We have, if you have time after, we can show you or the videos from the planning of this neighborhood. We've established some people are going to be replaced from there because they are right in the river with this drainage, where the drainage of the river is not possible.
Systems
so
are...
One of our main issues... Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you, Daniela. Drainage systems are, of course, a very essential basis for every city development, not only in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of health. But drainage systems as such are only one factor, because drainage systems have the role to deal with material we don't need anymore. When we are looking at developed countries and their infrastructure in this regard, where do you see deficits in the basic infrastructure with a special focus on the sustainability of cities?
Yeah, I think the waste, we see that the city, they are metabolic, there are different flow coming and going out, and we see, for instance, with the waste, that it's a very linear process, that we enter the water, we enter the energy, and it goes out as waste. And I think that will be interesting to have that more circular in the city. I think it's not only the material, but it's also some flow that we should make more circular, reusing the energy, of course, but reusing also the waste, yes?
When we are talking about waste in cities, we can see in some cities, especially in developing countries, where people are so poor that they don't have any chance to earn a living, but by working on the waste, because it's still a lot of labor work to be done to recycle waste. How can we in countries where the wages are much higher, how can we in such countries establish similar systems that that recycle more waste? Because I think nobody would be willing to go on a pile of waste to earn his living if he's not forced to.
Yeah, of course we can turn it to energy, or we cannot. Maybe it's not that literal. It's maybe convert it in some other flow. That's what I mean with waste. But there are also material that can be proceed. I think there is all a production that should be developed. I think we shouldn't think about maybe a kind of small activity, but we should think about productivity going back to the city, I think, and that will be very interesting because we put out the productivity out of city because it was too dirty. Now we have a quite of monofunctional city, and we see that the productivity was finally a bit part of the liveliness of the city, and the transformation and the reuse of waste will be very interesting to have this productive industry back in the city. There is an interesting example in Mechelen in Belgium. It is called the Impact Factory. It's basically people that come together and that produce a lot of different things based on the waste, but within the city, and that's what is interesting for the city.
You are emphasizing the topic of mixed use of cities with all different functions in short distances. We should be now having in line Eldar Salahov from Baku. He is member of the State Committee on Urban Planning and Architecture of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And Eldar, a warm welcome to you from us here in Graz.
Good afternoon.
You are also in charge of working on the master plan of Baku City as a part of the team. Could you tell us a little bit more about this project, especially about the question, which goals did you define when you started your master planning process, and which stakeholders did you involve?
Good evening, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me. Interesting subject also for us. I would like to say that for the time being, we are directly dealing with sustainable development of entire Azerbaijan and especially for Baku city. I would say that Baku master plan for the time being is under development. And you know, we have gained the independence starting from 1991, and it's the first master planning process after gaining the independence, which relies on markets economy. And at the same time, I have to say that we have decided to develop the concept of a new master plan, and that's why we, in close collaboration with our foreign consultants, namely the Boston Consulting Group, we have developed a concept which is playing a ground for developing master plan for Baku city, which will be ready by the end of this year or beginning of the next year. And these 4 priorities are fully aligned with sustainable development goals, all the 17 sustainable development goals, and especially sustainable development goals number 11, which sustainable cities and communities. If I have some time, I would like just to inform you regarding these 4 main priorities.
When you mentioned...
The first priority is on...
Yes, the first priority is on...
Yeah.
Well, I have one question. You mentioned you involved...
The first priority is... Yes, please.
You said in your strategy you involved consultant groups like Boston Consulting Group. May I ask you, which experience do they have to the really social needs and demands of the local people?
You know, we have made a wide range of stakeholders meetings. We have held around more than 300 meetings with all the stakeholders, from government side, from private side. And also, you know, the Boston Consulting Group has a wide experience worldwide in providing consulting services in urban planning and also in sustainable development. I think it was a very good experience for me and for my colleagues for future experience in urban development.
Aglaée mentioned before we have to bring the productivity back into the cities and we have to establish mixed use quotas in the cities. Is this one aspect you are also focusing on in your master plan?
Of course, it's one of the main aspects for master planning because, you know, historically Baku has one city center with very high density of construction, FAR and LAC. So our first idea and first priority was on establishing base for sustainable urban development, which is polycentricity and prioritization of the public transport with development of city infrastructure. You know, people are wasting too much time on traveling to and back to home. And at the same time, we have to develop public transport, which is environmentally friendly.
Does the question of zero waste and establishing structures for being able to follow this goal of zero waste, does this also play a role in your master plan?
Yeah, of course, waste disposal and waste segregation is very important point for us. Also, we would like to shift from linear economy to circular economy. And I have to say that for the time being in Baku, in outskirts of Baku, we have incineration plant for producing energy out of waste, and the residuals comes to agriculture as a fertilizer.
And do you also already cope with the challenges of collecting the waste for bringing it into these systems?
Yeah, of course. In city, recently we have started special colored water waste collecting baskets. People are segregating their waste, and I would say ratio of collecting waste back is very high for the time being. So it's a pilot project in part of Baku, and yeah.
No, you please continue.
Yeah. And it's very important. We understand that it's one of the key elements of sustainable development and lean production, and also, how to say, economic use of resources. So it's our first priority. The second priority was on urban and environmental rehabilitation. You know, Baku is famous for their oil and gas extraction, and some big areas of the city are heavily polluted with oil residuals and let's say dirty water. So the second issue was on providing clean solution and comprehensive approach to land use.
Thank you, Elda. To Baku, I would like to continue with this topic of zero waste, because we are talking about that as a goal, but does it work? And if it could work, how?
Yeah, I think first there have to be a shift about zero waste, because actually I think that in our developed countries, the waste problems or the waste management, so there are big waste problems, but the waste management is too good, because we just bring our waste out of the house and someone is taking away and we don't see it anymore. So I think it's not enough in our mind that we don't know where the waste is going and who has to work with this waste. So I think we have to change our value. We have to get more informed to think more about zero waste.
In industrialized countries, we are producing so much waste. Everybody of us, the plastic waste cannot be avoided, and that brings me to can almost not be avoided. That brings me to the next question. How strongly are the economical structures determining the sustainability of cities? Because most of the people are dependent on the possibilities for shopping, for buying their products within their everyday life. But you were doubtful. You say plastic can be avoided. How?
Maybe not the whole plastic, or not every kind of plastic is bad. But as you mentioned, yes, of course, the economics and the politics are very important. So everybody should work together. We spoke about co-working, about networking, about taking the knowledge of a lot of different people. About avoiding waste, there are already a lot of good examples how to produce products out of biodegradable waste. So you can take your product and give it back to the nature. And just to mention one of the examples, there is a company. They are producing water bubbles, and so it's not covered in plastic. The bubbles are out of seaweed, and actually you can swallow the seaweed and the water. And they used it, for example, last year for the London Marathon, and they could reduce 20,000 bottles of plastic for the sportlers.
Plastic bottles are having the shortest life cycle. We only use them once, and life cycle is one of the major topics when we are talking about the sustainability of whole societies. We have seen, due to economical interests, that the life cycles of many products have been shortened within the last year ever more, and the possibility to repair them has become more difficult. We should now have online Frédéric Cadet from Saint-Étienne. He is an eco-designer. He understands himself as an eco-designer and is working in his eco-design agency for a sustainable and desirable future. What a wonderful name for a company. Welcome, Frédéric.
Thank you. Welcome.
And as far as I know, you are strongly focusing on design that extends the life cycle of products and that gives products a more durable value. With which strategies?
Yeah, but one of the strategies I want to talk with you is about nudges. Their application on the fabulous possibilities that this type of process can have for human, but not only for human and for sustainability. First of all, what is a nudge? So it's a concept from behavioral science and political theory extract from industrial design practices. It can be compared to the affordance in product design. So it makes an indirect suggestion who can, without forcing, influence the motivations, incentives, and decision-making of a group or on individuals, although as efficiently as it was a direct instruction or with legislation or an enforcement. So, for example, I will give and I will send you thanks to the chat after. I will give you one made by Volkswagen, who makes some cars, who can you can find it in YouTube. On the film, adapt a sound system who simulate a very, very deep trash can bin, yes, thanks to a falling sound during 10 or 15 seconds. And at the end, it was a big shock bang at the end of the falling of the dish on the can. It surprised people and amused children when they drop a dish and the sound appears over. And so they are looking for all paper all around the can, and they check for packaging and all of the things to throw on. It significantly reduces the pollution on the park thanks to a game. And so I send you the web link thanks to the chat at the same time.
Yeah. Social engagement with games can be one of the strategies to reduce our consumption of goods. Another one can be sharing economy. And we have seen popping up a lot of sharing economy concepts in recent years. Some are local, many of them have been from big international companies, and we have seen failing many of these sharing economy projects, especially when we are talking about bike sharing projects in bigger metropolitan areas. I would like to pass this question to you, Husam. Do you have an explanation why some of these approaches of sharing economy, because the idea obviously is very good, why they failed?
I'm really delighted you raised these important issues because there is tendency sometimes with the politicians, as you know, they focus on what I call it all the time, large economy. So large economy, like everything has to be big, let us put it this way, big retailers, big industry, big things. And they have forgetting that the local, which I really like the phrase you use, sharing economy, because sharing economy is always about locality, the small one, the one to do with neighborhood and so on. One thing's unique about sharing economy all the time, that those who shop locally, those who work locally, in a way or another, create what I call it a very productive environment. And I like the phrase that the colleague said, bringing productivity to our city. And allow me to say, we need to bring productivity into our neighborhoods. I'm trying to focus a little bit into not only city center or city, but also neighborhoods. Sharing economy, the problem why it fails sometimes, if you don't have capacity, if you don't have understanding of catchment area, density in that area, I doubt whether local economy, it will work. What I am trying to argue, you need to have a kind of infrastructure and different things to support local economy. If you don't have that infrastructure to support the local economy itself wouldn't work. So there should be kind of, how can I say, an integrated approach to local economy in terms of density, access to facilities, services, building that local economy even around public transportation. If you don't have those elements, I do question whether local economy it will work. But I am a big fan these days into really pushing the concept of local economy. I am not against big economy. I think we need to have a balanced approach. Big economies, it could be useful at very national level, but I think the way forward as well to start investing more into local economy, and that's all the time in local neighborhoods. And I would like to finish with this phrase: city must be a connected, vibrant neighborhoods. There is tendency in Europe in general. We put our resources and money in the city, especially city center, and we assume if the city center flourish, everywhere else will flourish. And we do forget the importance of neighborhoods and the investment in the local neighborhoods, especially with the pandemic now. A lot of people are still keen to stay and work from home. But to do so, those people need different types of access, different types of services. And I am afraid we don't have a sense of neighborhood. We don't have sense of locality. Anyway, thank you.
Having a sense of neighborhood and having a sense of locality for supporting local economy is in fact an area where city administrations can do something other than in urban planning, where they are dependent on the national government and on the national legislation as well. Would you have some recommendations in which activities to invest first from a city government to support local economy?
Yeah, I think it's the local economy and this proximity of shopping. I think it's very strongly connected with the mobility. And I will say we should really more relate in the planning the space and the time. When we have a short walking or bicycle distance to the amenities, of course we will use more those amenities. And we see now with the home working that we have, and I think that will not change. That we learn to this teleworking, and I think it will remain a percentage of people working at home. I think we see a rebound effect in the mobility. It's very interesting that the people, they don't anymore go to the work, but then they take the car to go to shop to buy the bread that before they bought on the way to go to the work. Then I think really that we should avoid, and that's why I totally agree that we should have sub-centra with local facilities, but they can be temporary, like local small market or whatever, to provide this. But it's really, I think, my advice will be to relate it to a very performant infrastructure for pedestrian and cyclists, that they reach this, that we can avoid this rebound effect.
To avoid this rebound effect, societies are changing in the different quarters because people are getting older when they settle there. And you mentioned the aspect of temporary structures. How important is that also for establishing a local community, because people can it is more easy for them to involve themselves?
It's very important. We see our population in the European city, they get older and older, and we see that many people, they are really isolated, and this kind of local infrastructure of course can provide also a community life that is maybe not existing that much. And if we want to keep our elderly people autonomous, and I think it's what we should aim, we should try to keep people autonomous as long as possible. I think we should also provide this local and infrastructure from the proximity.
To provide local infrastructure from the proximity is also a basis for establishing local networks for different forms of reuse, upcycling, economy. What are the basic needs to establish, let's say, reuse, upcycling networks? Shall they just be bottom up, or can city administrations trigger them and nudge them a little bit?
No, of course it has to be both sides. So bottom up and top down, of course. And cities has to function as the co-principle, and the co-principle is the leader. So we have to use the know-how of the politics, of the economy, and of the people itself to make, to create a good community, happy people, and sustainable cities. Yeah.
To create a good community, have happy people and sustainable cities. I think this is a good summary for not only the discussion today, but also for our last 3 days, where we have been talking about social design, which is very strongly linked to the debate we just now had, and to smart city development. Everything is linked together. I would like to thank all of you here in the studio and to you online for being with us today and for having participated in this discussion. And I hope you were able to take away some ideas and inspirations from the last 3 days for your own work in the future. Thank you also for all partners from the UNESCO City Network, to Steen in Kortrijk and to Cindy in Wuhan, the coordinators of the UNESCO City of Design Network. And of course, a round of virtual applause to Angelika and Wolfgang with their team here in Graz, who facilitated this whole conference together with Isabella and Sonja of the City of Design team in Saint-Étienne. These both teams were enabling this conference. But most importantly, we are all tired of online conferences, I assume. Therefore, we are all looking forward to meet in person as soon as the circumstances enable it, to meet, to mingle, to develop creative ideas together in a vivid social society, and hopefully already next summer in Istanbul, when the next annual meeting of UNESCO City of Design should take place in Istanbul, hopefully live, to find some answers to the question that set up the framework for the last 3 days. How do we want to live? Not online only, that's for sure. See you soon in real life, and goodbye from Graz.